Hey guys, welcome back to Combat Clarification. For today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the Vacuum Palm, the signature technique of the Way of the Void style from Grappler Baki. Special thanks to NSL Kage for the suggestion. Please go check out their channel, they do some really great Baki edits. Let's start with a brief description of the technique. Vacuum palm, also known as kusho, hollow palm, or empty palm, is a technique in which the user creates a vacuum in the palm of their hand. The vacuum palm is very difficult to master and requires proper instruction to learn. If you'd like a brief rundown of the vacuum palm, as well as Benda, Poison Hand, and the Way of the Void style on the whole, please go and check out my Styles Explained video on the Way of the Void. But to explain what the vacuum palm is, vacuum palm allows for its user to create a suction cup-like effect which causes the palm of their hand to stick to an object/surface, or make the object/surface stick to their palm. It's easier to do so with something heavy that has a smooth surface, such as a bowling ball. Using this technique with a piece of paper is among the highest level. Yanagi uses this technique to create a vacuum in his palm that contains less than 6% oxygen. The improper oxygen level causes an opponent to be knocked unconscious, should the vacuum make contact with their face, specifically the nose and mouth. In essence, it's just as Kunimatsu explains. The principle behind it is simple. You create a vacuum inside the palm. It's just like an octopus's suckers in short. As this technique is exclusive to the Way of the Void style, the only known users of the technique are Ryuukou Yanagi, the world's foremost master of the Way of the Void style, Kunimatsu, the current head of the school and Yanagi's master, and Jin Kano, Yanagi's disciple. It is possible that other members of the school potentially have the skill as well, and of course Yujiro, who knows and has mastered all martial arts on Earth, and Baki, who can copy a move at master level after only seeing it once or twice, can also likely perform the technique, but the aforementioned three are the only ones we ever actually see using it. The technique is incredibly powerful, generating enough suction in the palm of the user's hands for them to lift up a bowling ball or even rip a chunk of a wood plank out of a floorboard, but an extremely skilled user such as Yanagi could even create suction enough to lift up something as flimsy and fluid as a piece of paper, or generate a vacuum strong enough to rip right through something as sturdy and rigid as a concrete wall, or even the same reinforced glass used for jet cockpits. For reference, that glass has to be sturdy enough to withstand the G-force a jet would be exposed to, and is strong enough to be considered quite highly bullet resistant. Specifically, Yanagi's vacuum palm can effortlessly tear through NIJ level 3A glass, which has a level of bulletproofing that makes it practically immune to small arms fire, from a 44 caliber round to even a 7.62mm rifle round. Even a lower level practitioner like Jin, who is easily the weakest of the Way of the Void trio, can create a vacuum strong enough to support his entire body weight, allowing him to cling to surfaces like the ceiling and not only move around rapidly, but also transition effortlessly from the ground and back up to the ceiling whenever he wants. That said, while the vacuum palm has incredible versatility and utility in its tearing through obstacles and obstructions, and even allowing the user three-dimensional mobility or wall climbing like Spider-Man, the primary use for this technique is for offensive purposes, namely rending the flesh of the user's opponents from their bones. While clothing has been shown to inhibit the user's ability to get a firm grip on the skin and muscle of their target, a single moment of contact from the user's palm on the target's bare flesh can result in a mortal wound. While the details of their match are, to my knowledge, currently still uncertain, Shibukawa states that Yanagi removed his eye in their first fight with the vacuum palm, and there are plenty of other instances we can look to see the destructive capacity of this technique. For example, in his battle with Taizan Matsumoto, Kozue's father, Ryuukou Yanagi fatally wounded Taizan with a vacuum palm to the heart. Yanagi's apprentice Jin Kano ripped off a portion of the flesh-covering boxing champion Flash Hayata's lower left ribs. He also picked Hayata up off of the ground with a vacuum palm to the top of his back between his shoulder blades. And Yanagi's master, Kunimatsu, used vacuum palm in a friendly sparring match against Mumon Katsuragi, where he very nearly ripped the flesh off of Mumon's back, only being stopped by the fabric of his shirt, yet still leaving a massive suction bruise. And he almost tore the flesh off of Mumon's chest with his foot after cutting an opening into his shirt, only failing due to Mumon's understanding of the mechanics of the technique and opting to rush towards Kunimatsu, preventing him from pulling far enough away. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Sure, it's brutal and probably severely debilitating, but it doesn't seem as lethal as you've made it out to be. Of all the times you've just mentioned, only one of those instances was lethal, and while it was against a strong fighter like Taizan, He also survived the initial encounter, walked all the way from the amusement park to the park where Mumon was and fought Mumon, and then spent a night with his family before passing away. And yeah, it did take a while for him to die from wounds received, and Yanagi failed twice before he succeeded, once because of Taizan's shirt, and once because of Taizan's sheer raw muscle strength. And even when he did succeed, he only did so by distracting Taizan by threatening Kozue, and worst of all, Taizan actually won the fight and could have killed Yanagi, but I personally think that killing a fighter as strong as Taizan is more than enough to make a technique formidable, regardless of circumstances. Still though, I can understand what you're saying, so let's take another look at Yanagi's use of the technique. For starters, let's take a look at the inciting incident to Yanagi's time as a fugitive and threat to society, what I've taken to calling the Night of Void. After dueling Kunimatsu and defeating him, then tearing or cutting off his arm through unknown means, he proceeded to then wander around with Kunimatsu's dismembered arm in his mouth, and when 5 police officers were dispatched to arrest him, some of whom had even been candidates for the Olympics, he used his techniques to fatally wound or disable all of them in the blink of an eye. Now, it's difficult to tell what exact techniques Yanagi used due to his moving so fast and us only getting a single panel of the battle, but the odds that he used both Benda and Vacuum Palm are pretty high. Additionally, at a later point, Yanagi also attacks a gang, using Vacuum Palm to tear a hole out of the window of their building while clinging to it, then worming into the room and basically tearing the gang to shreds, using a plethora of fatal and permanently injuring techniques, including an instance where he uses the Vacuum Palm to rip off half of a man's face. Finally, Yanagi also once battled Jin Kano's older brother as a young man. Jin's older brother was known publicly for his exceptional evasive skills, even being able to completely avoid all the attacks of a slightly younger Shibukawa, even if barely. But when he got involved in the underground world and was made to use his skills in increasingly more life-threatening situations for more and more money, he was eventually asked to fight a young Ryuukou Yanagi. Unfortunately, despite his fantastic agility, Yanagi caught him one single time and basically ripped off half of his face, including one of his eyes, leaving him unable to dodge as he did before due to a lack of depth perception, and leaving him horribly disfigured. Though this instance wasn't outright lethal, Yanagi instantly won the fight in a single touch, effectively ruined Jin's older brother's life, and eventually pushed him into a depression so deep, he decided to game over. This being Jin's main motivation for learning the way of the void from Yanagi, so that he could use the style to kill Yanagi and exact his revenge. Now, for as horrifying and lethal as Vacuum Palm is, we know that it only becomes a more terrifying technique from here. For as versatile and deadly a technique as this is, we're aware that there remains an even higher level to it. Upon reaching the utmost highest level of mastery with the technique, a level of skill that seemingly only Yanagi has achieved thus far, we see that the Vacuum Palm reaches its magnum opus. This technique, in its mastered form, allows for the user to create a vacuum of 6% or less oxygen content in the palm of their hand, and, rather than using it for suction purposes, the user can then force the opponent to inhale said 6% or less oxygen, which in turn causes them to instantly lose consciousness and can even result in instantaneous death. In a style with techniques like Benda, a technique that's insanely fast and can damage a person no matter how strong they are, or techniques like Poison Hand, which greatly weakens or even guarantees the death of anyone in a single touch, Vacuum Palm, when mastered to this level, is the only technique that is quite literally a guaranteed one-shot no matter what. To even maintain consciousness, let alone survive this technique, your op has to be someone that literally just doesn't breathe. Before we continue, very briefly, I'd just like to let you guys know that the channel now officially has a Twitter, so if you guys want to interact with me more often, or if you guys want to see my goofy memes, or you want updates on projects I'm working on, be sure to follow me there. Alright, that's all for this brief update, back to your regularly scheduled program. What Yanagi does to land the Vacuum Palm technique is essentially the striker's equivalent of muffling or a muffle choke, a technique used in real-life grappling martial arts to restrict the airflow through the mouth and nose of an opponent by covering the mouth and nose with your hand. Yanagi's muffle is a bit different mechanically, as the muffle prevents breathing, whereas Yanagi uses the pressure of a vacuum to alter the chemical composition of the air the opponent is still very much breathing, but regardless, this technique is still very widely used in real-life combat sports even today. What sets Vacuum Palm apart is that Yanagi uses his palm to reduce pressure. Being that a vacuum is a space with very little matter, including air, when Yanagi creates that vacuum in the palm of his hand, it also reduces the contents of all gases, including the oxygen in the air. Humans typically breathe air with an oxygen content of 21%, but by significantly reducing the gas content in the air in the target's nose and mouth using the vacuum in his palm, Yanagi decreases the oxygen content below 6%, to a level said by OSHA to be lethal to humans due to causing hypoxia or even anoxia, a severe case of hypoxia. While I must admit that realistically, in a hypothetical scenario where a person could create a vacuum in their hand, while the vacuum would remove the air in the nose and mouth, dropping the oxygen content of the air inhaled to less than 6% and causing suffocation, and the pressure drop in the airways caused by the vacuum would also make it difficult to breathe, this wouldn't cause an instant knockout as shown in Baki. The knockout occurs because the brain requires a constant flow of oxygen. By using the vacuum palm to cause anoxia, completely cutting off all oxygen flow, after 10 to 15 seconds, 5 seconds at best, the brain would be completely deprived of oxygenated blood, causing the target to lose consciousness. The perfect vacuum seal over the nose and mouth would draw out the air, prevent inhalation, and lower air pressure in the respiratory tract, which is the most you could possibly do to choke a person. The reason this wouldn't knock them out instantly, though, is because even with all the oxygen they inhaled sucked out of them and the vacuum preventing them from intaking any more oxygen, the oxygen they inhaled prior to having the vacuum palm applied would still be oxygenating their blood, and that couldn't really be sucked out or affected by the vacuum without just straight up collapsing their lungs or exsanguinating them of all their blood completely, which we know isn't the case as Kita Arashi was knocked unconscious from anoxia rather than suffering from either of those symptoms. Still though, a lot of the general science and physiology that we see from the vacuum palm in Baki is surprisingly accurate despite it being an entirely fictional technique. The only technique I could possibly find the vacuum palm to be based on was something like the Muffler Choke, seen commonly in a lot of modern grappling martial arts, as well as in arts like ninjutsu in a manner more similar to how it's used in the Way of the Void, but the similarities are only superficial. Alright folks, I think that's about it for the vacuum palm. For more information, again, please go check out the Way of the Void Explained video. We missed the like goal for the last combat clarification, but I do enjoy making these videos, so this time, I'll make it a little easier for you guys. If you guys want another combat clarification video as the next video, an explanation video for the ultra high level Sen-no-Sen of Miyamoto Musashi, let's try to get this video to 230 likes in 2 weeks. Only 230 likes and y'all got 2 whole weeks. I believe in y'all, you can do it. Alright, I've been Red Fox, the endless content creator, and this has been Combat Clarification Grappler Baki Techniques Explained. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.